Boom, there we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Vagabond Dog Industry Chats. This week's guest, Nicholas McDonnell from Samurai Punk. How are you doing, buddy? It's been a bit.
I'm doing okay. Yeah, it's been many years, and we're doing okay down here.
Yeah. Let's see. You guys may know Samurai Punk from Screen Sheet, The American Dream, Roombo First Blood, or Feathers. I'd say are probably the biggest ones. But you guys actually have a couple more than that.
We have there's two different versions of Screen Sheet. Feather is on a bunch of stuff and sort of exists. We also did a game with a game called Table of Tales with Tim Man Games. We're a co-developer on that. It's another VR. It's like VR D&D meets Jumanji. And we did a mobile game back in 2014 called Hazamino, which I think you might be able to still get, but I have no idea. That is everything. So yeah, there's Roombo First Blood, and now we're working on Justice Sucks,
right?
Which is the spiritual sequel to Roombo First Blood due to iRobot.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've known you guys since I think we must have met first PAX where you were showing Screen Sheet.
We like PAX West maybe
2014. That would have been our first PAX as well. And it's kind of crazy to, like, I mean, I made 2 games in that time. You guys have really been kicking it out. And what has kind of impressed me about the games you guys have released is that they are all very different. I think you guys have a bit of a comedic thread that runs through a lot of the project. But man, you guys hit a lot of different genres and experiment a little bit more than I think the average. You haven't sat in a groove so much. Yes. I guess the first thing I want to ask or whatever is what was it like, just shipping Screen Sheet and sort of deciding your next project?
Well, I guess that is that case, like Screen Sheet, we shipped it in 2014 in August. So we worked on the first version of the game for 8 months. But then we did updates and porting for like almost a year and a half. So it ended up being almost a 2-year production. It was somewhere along those lines. So by the end of 2015, we were still kind of working on Screen Sheet while we had started to work on what would eventually be the next game, which was American Dream. But we did various things in between that never went anywhere. We did and then in 2016, we did like a version of Feather, which is Fruits of a Feather. But because we never really stopped working on Screen Sheet over that period of time, we every other project we were working on was always like a break. Because Screen Sheet porting, we were very new to development.
Right.
And porting is awful the first time you do it in-house. So it was, I think it was just a relief to do something totally different.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So it's you're taking a break from your main development with side projects, and then...
Yes. Those side projects become the main project.
Right. I mean... it's healthy, yeah.
Yeah, in the case of American Dream, that was like that. We for some reason we set PAX West 2016 as a deadline for we have to show a new game, we have to announce something new. I don't know why we said that to ourselves, and we produced the first version of that in a couple of weeks. That was the version we ended up showing at PAX West, but in between we had worked on a bunch of other things as well. I don't know. I don't really know how we came to that point. Because at the time it was just me, Ellie, and Winston.
Right.
We were still just 3 people at that point. And I think it was just we also didn't know how to do what is game 2 was a big problem for a long time. We don't really have that anymore because now we're so far past the point of what is game 2. We don't consider that first mobile game to be a game we did because it was so small. So we had to really, and Screen Sheet had done pretty well on the scope of indie games, even in 2014. Long term, running a business, it hasn't done that well. But in the scale of what it's like to release a game now, it had. So we had that pressure to produce something of equal value, I guess. Try to have something that actually could resonate with people. So that pressure put us in a weird spot.
So I mean, I'm curious about the pressure, because I mean, nobody I mean, as much as like, I feel like that's a lot of internal pressure. Like, I know I absolutely
It's
felt
all internal.
right.
Yes.
So, I mean, like, where is that based out of? Like, what did it's 2016. What made you decide that PAX we're gonna hit with something? Why not just keep waiting and seeing?
So, I guess it kind of some part of it was starting to come down to finances. We hadn't Screensheet had never done like our first launch day was 300 copies, and then it went down. That was launch day.
Right.
Not a lot of people know that. Like it was a really bad launch on Steam, and we had never really had a big breakout window with that game. So the money was always draining away. We weren't paying ourselves almost anything at the time. Most of the money we were making was going to rent because we knew that working from home wasn't working out for us. So we got a small office so that we could sort of stay focused. And we could sort of see the sort of the timeline of that game dwindling. Even after it had come out on consoles, it wasn't making a whole lot of cash. And even with the three of us, we wanted to move to salaries. So we sort of felt both the internal pressure to grow. There's also like the Melbourne industry. At the time, there was a lot of pressure to grow. We felt like because the whole industry had collapsed in 2008, and everyone had gone indie, or what was left had gone indie, there were a few small studios. So there's this weird thing of like, if you had any form of a hit, I think Hipster Whale with Crossy Road is a good example. Now I would say like Goose Game is another example of like a game that I would expect them to do something with that money.
Right.
And people were looking at us as like, okay, well, you got a little bit of government funding. And like, I mean, a little bit of government funding. You got a game that kind of made some money. What are you going to do next? Like, how are you going to capitalize on that and sort of help the local industry? Or just do something with your time. And then there was the pressure of like Screensheet resonated really strongly with people, and everything we were designing at the time was just not clicking with us creatively, and it wasn't clicking like on that same level. So we felt that pressure. Like we're like, well, the second game has to have that same like implicit marketability and that implicit hook for it to succeed. Because we knew our like level of craft was so low that we weren't going to be able to make something that was particularly good. to be frank, like even now it's like learning how to make something that's like good at like a production level. It's like well produced, it looks good, it sounds good, it plays good across the board. Just hitting that is hard, on top of making something that's interesting, on top of making something that's marketable. I think we were really feeling it at the time. And we were like 22 or 23. Like we didn't really know what we're doing.
Right. I mean, that is a lot of factors that can come into play. And I mean, I can completely empathize because I feel like after ASM, we were in a very, very similar boat. We decided to double down on pretty much the exact same thing. We made Sometimes Always Monsters. But look, what did Screensheet 2 ever come into mind? Was there any hey, we should make another multiplayer shooter kind of thing?
That's a good one, I guess, because that's what we've been talking about a lot lately. Screensheet 2 never came to mind because I guess at the time we had this rule of never making sequels.
Makes sense. Good idea.
We just didn't want to make sequels. I mean, there was also the prevailing logic that indies can't make sequels. That like sequels just won't make money.
Yeah.
That was the thing for AAA, and we also knew that Screensheet had an extreme limiting factor, and you can kind of see it now. Like the strongest online competitive or even casual online games have strong characterization, and Screensheet is a game about invisible players. So you couldn't say do a free to play game where the thing you were buying was skins and cosmetics.
Right.
And the gimmick and the mechanic of the game is also kind of strange and doesn't allow for some of what is standard for the market. So it wasn't until later down the line, I think it was 2017, we did the remaster, but that was for Switch because Switch was doing well, and we still hadn't done a Nintendo platform, so that made a lot of sense to us. And that was basically we rebuilt everything, like not the game internally, but like we redid all the art, the music, the art direction changed. And we wanted to make it look like a Nintendo game. We wanted to make it look like if Nintendo had made Screensheet. Whereas the first game again was very very rough.
Right, first game. You just do what you do.
Yeah.
So So I mean, these are all tough decisions to be making when you're a young, fresh studio. You know, guys entering the industry trying to make these calls. What changed? When did you guys start to grow? Because it seems like I blinked and now you have a billion titles done, and they're all very good.
It was between. We didn't have anyone until 2016. It was when we were working on American Dream. It was still the three of us for a little while, and kind of two things happened at the same time. Dream was getting big, like it was just becoming a very large game, and we knew we needed better art on it, and which I was just not capable of doing. I was getting spread really thin at the time. My role in the team tended to be like art, animation, sound design, and like visual effects. I was just getting really spread thin. And then an opportunity came up with the one with Tin Man Games where they wanted to build a VR game. We had already started making one. So we pitched that to Sony. And the pitch was Tin Man Games makes great RPGs. We could do some VR stuff. We've made some other games. We've done consoles. So we came in with PS4 experience and VR experience, and they came in with RPG, and we got that game funded. So we hired a programmer to bring us on for that. Ellie ended up moving on to that project. So we were then at 4. We hired an art director and just essentially a production artist, which is Syrian Guillaume. He took over most of my work on American Dream. And then we worked with the Shell and the Pit, the team out of Vancouver. They did the sound for the game and the music, and well, they sort of audio directed it. They did the sound, and then we worked with Riley, did the music. So we tried to sort of like raise the bar for that game whilst also doing this other thing that paid the bills. It just kind of all happened at once, and then we just kind of kept rolling with this idea of always working on like 1 or 2 projects at a time. And somewhere in there, I started making Feather.
Just as a stress relief.
Yeah, well, it really was stress relief. That game was very stressful to work on. Not Feather. American Dream became very, very stressful to work on because it was just so big. I just didn't know what to. I literally had no experience in working on something that large.
Well, at that, and I mean, people forget like a lot of the things we take for granted in VR were still being learned at that time. You know,
yes.
It's one of those things where I know, a lot of people associate VR with the big AAA studios because they're the ones who can throw infinite amounts of money at the research and figuring things out and stuff. But I've been with and worked with small indie teams during VR nascence, and man, tell me about that process for you guys. Like what were you studying at the time? What games were you studying at the time when you were working on Dream? And what were the big obstacles that you guys had to try and overcome?
So we were looking at stuff like I Expect You to Die.
Yes.
And some of the stuff that had come out on PlayStation 4, like Psychonauts VR, I think came out sort of in the middle of production. These like sort of like narrative, short-ish length experiences. I think Sony also did it was called the London Heist. We only had the demo. I don't think the actual real game came out till a long time later. To be honest, we actually didn't play enough VR. Mostly what we were playing was Beat Saber didn't come out till later. God, all these like landmark VR games didn't come out till later. There were demos at the time. There wasn't a lot of limited narrative experiences that weren't super, super short. Right. Like Mountain, Us Two Games had made their little thing on Gear VR. But yeah, there weren't a lot of games we could look at. Not until later in development, when at that point we were so like blinded by just finishing the thing that we didn't take time to stop and be like, okay, I've played this. Now I can take these learnings forward. The decision for us to go seated was based on the fact that at the time, a lot of the standing games weren't very comfortable to play. So which is now the opposite. Like it's like suicidal to make a VR game that's seated. You just shouldn't do it. That's what we were playing. And the process was just all from scratch. I think there wasn't a lot of learnings up there. We knew some people, we were friends because sort of as a result of working with Shell in the Pit, there were some learnings taken from the Fantastic Contraption developers. They sort of passed on some knowledge, but that was mostly technical. I think like the only thing that was really around was technical knowledge of just like making sure it ran properly. But yeah, like the actual. Sorry, go ahead.
No, did you even consider, like, I feel like at that point in time, a lot of people jumped into VR because hot new thing, shiny new toy, without even remotely considering the challenge ahead. Did it ever like even come into the game plan, like being like, oh shit, we're gonna have to like invent a genre here almost?
That did not come into our heads at all. What we did know, so like we were working, we had a pitch for the game before we started making it. The pitch was, I think it was it's a deck that said like, I have no mouth and I must shoot, or I have no hands and I must shoot. It was like you do everything with guns. That was basically the pitch. And we couldn't actually envision it in flat screen. We just were like, we don't know how this game would work. And it wasn't until we had some VR games that we could try. I think we sent the pitch to Sony and we're like, can you send us a headset so we could, because our first build, unlike most developers who do Vive stuff, our first build was in PlayStation.
Interesting.
Because we wanted to mess with that hardware. And yeah, we just had like an experience where you could just like walk around a kitchen and like mess with stuff with guns, but you had no hands. And we were like, well, the game works in this platform, in this medium. The joke of I have no hands and I have to do everything with guns lands here. So that's what we'll stick to. We really did not have the foresight to be like, oh, there are all these challenges that we will have to learn from scratch. Also, the foresight of like that concept of scaffolding for a business of like, we're going to spend 2 years on this thing. We didn't think we were going to spend 2 years on it. I think we thought we were going to spend 8 months on it. But if we spend 2 years on this thing, what knowledge can we take from this into future titles, even if they're not the same genre?
Right.
That was probably the biggest mistake of that title.
I mean, 'cause you guys haven't done another VR.
We finished Table of Tales,
Yeah,
but that was around the same time. I think that came out in Dream was late 17 or 18. No, it's March 18. That's right. So Table of Tales, I think, was also like April or August 18. And then we moved on. We did some contracting work around 2019. That was VR, and that was basically as a result. We kept getting offered contracts that were VR. Right. So I guess there's like a business incentive for it because there's a lot of contract work out there for it, and that keeps the lights on, keeps people paid, keeps the office open. But yeah, it's not like you could I don't think you could directly look at American Dream and then look at games we've worked on since and say like, oh, I can see this knowledge of shaders has improved, or I can see their like engine tech has improved as a result of doing that work.
Right. I mean, the one thing I think you could see from your future games is there is a common thread of some sort of gag or novel element that like
yes.
It permeates the game's core, right? It's either I'm a robot vacuum cleaner, or I'm I have no hands and I'm a shoot. I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts on, I mean, spending 2 years plus on what some might call a novelty.
Yeah.
Do you have? How do you feel about first that criticism, versus making more tried and true but blander or more straightforward experience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anything we make, anything across, we just refer to all our games as being like attempting to be novel as like one of the things we strive for. I think that's what we do as a business. That's what we're trying to do. So the amount of time we spend, I think, is justified as long as the end result is more than just novel. Like if it's novel and interesting and either successfully challenges the medium or successfully is an interesting game that you want to play more than once, or it leaves you with something, then it was worth it. Doesn't matter how much time you spent on it, right. Assuming it doesn't sink the company.
Rule number one.
I guess that's the outcome. Is like if people were paid to do it, no one is sad afterwards. The result is good, and the company is still alive. Then it was a good outcome for us. You look in Dream's case, that game was a bit long. Like where the title itself is too long, and it could have been shorter, and that would have saved us money and time that we could have either just stopped working on it sooner, or we could have reinvested into polish to make what was there better. But that's like a hindsight 2020 kind of thing that you can't say. You know, if we made a second game, I think we would definitely do a better job in that realm. But yeah, as far as the novelty side of stuff, like I think that's the whole point. I would be working somewhere else, or I even don't think I would be working in games if I didn't care about that.
Right. It's something you enjoy.
Yeah, I mean that's why we started a studio. I mean, I started the studio because I couldn't get a job. But like I said, the industry crashed in 2008. There were no jobs in Australia, and there's few now. So, and you know, going overseas is like a scary concept when you're a student who went to a pretty bad university, so didn't really learn a whole lot. So yeah, it was like after we made Screen Sheet, we were like, oh, this is I guess after even now, 7 years on, like this is something we're good at. Is being novel, and it resonates with people. So that's what we're going to stick to.
There is something I think inherently charming and earnest in the lack of pretension that comes with it. That, you know, a lot of the let's be realistic here. A lot of the indie game space can get very navel gazy, a bit into itself, and that's something that I think is really appreciated. Having some levity with games, having fun making games, and bringing games that are fun and funny, which is something I really like. But I'm curious, do you ever wish to go completely down the other direction and make something that's like super serious and like this is the story of life or me or whatever?
Oh,
I mean,
we have serious games. We're working on Trios, which is a math puzzle game, which is like very straight faced and very polished. And we have Feather, which is a very polished game, and it's very simple and straightforward. I guess that game is pretentious though. But I would refer that as a serious game. Like it means a lot to me, and it has a place for a lot of people. Our community love it, but people hate it as well because it's not a game apparently. But as for making, I guess it's like if I was just gonna make like Spec Ops: The Line, I guess that kind of
right.
Well, that's probably not a good example. That's actually a good game. That game has a point. I'm trying to think of something that's like sort of. Yeah, I guess I just want to make that kind of game. It's just not something I'm interested in. I think it would be a good learning experience, you know, but I wouldn't want it to be ours or mine. I wouldn't want it to be something that the studio made. Like, I'd go do that. I would send the whole team to work for a AAA studio for a year for the sake of getting better development.
Interesting.
Not for the sake of the outcome. I don't know. I'd rather someone pay us to do it, and it's not ours, and our name's not on it.
Interesting. What is it about the ownership of the philosophy behind the game or whatever?
I guess it's like, as a designer, because I guess that's what I do more or less these days. There's not a lot of interesting decisions to be made or things to challenge. Like I guess there's not much work to do. Because our games kind of have a spectrum of like how weird they are, right? And the more straight-laced a game gets, the less challenging it is to work on. Mm-hmm. And also the quicker decisions get made tends to be like, because you can really quickly look at market references or just stuff you've played that you like and be like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We've already reinvented enough wheels in this game. Like, let's keep this stuff the same because this way players will understand stuff better. And, you know, that way the focus is on the thing that's new, not the stuff that we don't actually have to redo. And when it comes to that, it's like, oh, yeah, it's like really easy to just sort of like chop and change bits from other games that or are in like 100 games, like menu systems or abilities or stats, right? And there's an upside to that as a designer because it's like a consistent language that players understand and they can translate through games. But it's also not challenging and it's not interesting to me as a craft person. Mm-hmm. Like I think for the player, as long as the bulk of the experience is new and interesting or challenging, then they're happy and they're getting something out of it. But for me as a creator, like from, you know, if not enough of the game is different, then why are we spending like
Right.
it's a lot of time to spend as a human being on something that isn't new.
Right, it's already been done. Somebody else already did it, and they probably did it better already. Like, I know what you feel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the other thing. I guess, like, yeah, someone is definitely doing it better than us. So, where can we provide value to the world, right? Because we're not going to provide it in like we're not was it Supergiant. We're not going to. If we did a roguelike action game, we're not going to produce something of that fidelity. So I guess it's like kind of crass to say we shouldn't try, but I guess like what's the value in trying to the world?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you just said you could end up putting a couple years into it, and ending up with something maybe at best as good as the competition. But
Yeah.
I mean, on the notion of competition, like there is this weird. I want to say where 2014, 2016 novelty games or games with a gag in them were substantially rare. I think with the influx of Steam Direct and just the glut of games available now, I mean, there is an abundance of games made quick for a meme or a gag. I've produced one of these. But there's a difference between something like The American Dream and Hentai Hitler Anime Girl Game 42, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is that line? I know that the players on Steam can see the difference. They know the difference. But I haven't, and I've been on the lucky end of landing in the good side of it, but I don't know how or what it was, and I'm curious if having more experience, if you have any enlightenment on that factor. What is that factor?
I don't know. Maybe it's like the game is when you make the game, you start off with wouldn't it be funny if X, right? And you start producing the title, you get past that point very quickly, I think.
Right.
When you're working on it, because to achieve wouldn't it be funny if X, you can technically do that in a day if you're any good at whatever respective engine you work in, or if you have your own engine. And then I think the motivation. So people talk about incentives a lot, but I think it's the motive. It's like why you as a creator are producing the title is important, and it is reflected in the work. If your intention for producing this meme game or this piece of creative work that has a novelty to it, like not explicitly reflecting a meme, is to make money, I think it'll be seen in the title. I think you can see that in even if you will make, like, we're talking about like roguelike action games. I think it's the exact same thing there. If your intention is to make money, even if you achieve that with a level of fidelity that players kind of can't notice, you can still feel it. And I think the same thing applies where if your intention is to use that joke to tell a story or to be very funny, like you're like, this is a great opportunity to actually tell a real joke beyond just the one-off gag, or it opens up mechanical opportunities for design. It turns out you've actually just got a really interesting game that's like worth playing for its own sake beyond that joke. Then it's pretty clear. I think once it's the same thing, I guess, like how players can't verbalize when they think a game is polished, they never know how to describe it, right? But the difference between a game that's like 5 out of 10 polished and a game that's 10 out of 10 polished is like imperceptible to a player beyond this game feels really good and I don't know why, right? But as a developer, you know why, because you can break it down, you can chop and change all those little bits, and you can see all these little elements are different and better, or like were more developed, and that's why. So yeah, for me, it's incentive for you as a creator, and I think it's reflected in the work. Maybe there's times where that's not the case, and someone has like been able to both go at it because they just want cash, and they've managed to sneak it by. But I'm not sure if that's the case.
Right. It raises a very, very strange paradox because, like, standard capitalist philosophy says that the guy who sets out to do it for making the most amount of money is probably going to like figure out and nail that X factor that the people who don't, stumble into. is there any is there something about the want of money that poisons art, or what is it? What is that thing that ruins it? Why is it when you want to do something for money, it goes bad?
I think it's because because it is a product. It's like, because games are like 50% art, 50% a product, right? If we were just making a product, we want to compete to make the best version of toothpaste out there.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to see, okay, who's going to make the first million, right? The person who's more driven to make that first million will win, because something that is designed to be consumed for its purpose, for the sake of consumption, like especially like a product like toothpaste, the only outcome for the consumer is they bought it, right?
Yeah.
And I think with games, it goes, and especially the way the games are marketed and the way the algorithms are all working and the way that people talk to each other and they share things with their friends. You're not going to share something with your friend if you, like, for a laugh, bought something for $5 on Steam, and then you're like, well, it was just what at face value I thought it was going to be, right? So there's no way you're going to share that with your friends. But I think if it goes beyond that, you will share it, and you will, like, have some emotional attachment to it because it was worth it.
Right. Yeah. No. It's absolutely true. Like I've seen that play out in the reviews, and the acclaim that one of our games got.
Yeah. I guess it's like almost the joke of players being like, I thought it was just a gimmick, but
yeah. It can be really hard to. Okay. So then when you're in the midst of it, because I've been there, where I'm making this, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we made a game? We made a game about Karens, right? And we're in the midst of this project, and it's like, okay, what, other than having this belief in yourself that the X factor is this extra effort and going beyond as a developer, what keeps that motivation alive for you? Rather than just being like, well, we've checked the box, it is a game about XYZ. Do I have to do more? Like, where does that come from in your head?
I think now at this point, it's like we have some amount of pedigree as a studio, even Roombo First Blood, like, and we there's just like a consistent, and this is not just me, this is coming from all the staff. Whenever we do reviews or we talk as a team, everyone always wants they want every game we make to be better than the last one. And that doesn't necessarily mean bigger. They just mean, like, learn from our mistakes. We don't want to step backwards. I think this is just as a crafts kind of thing. Like, people don't want to do something that was worse than the last thing they did. If you make a model of a human, you want the next one to look nicer. If you're a programmer, you want the next game to be more stable and to run faster. And the result of that is kind of like, it's almost like a coincidence, I guess, that just like having those kind of people around means that when you produce something like that, and if we were like, let's say we did another game about, I don't know, we got Roombo. So Roombo's a really good example because that game was made in 6 weeks. We did a little bit of work on it afterwards to do all the various ports, but the core production was 6 weeks. It was quick, it was dirty. We learned a lot from that process. And it was basically the best thing we could do in 6 weeks. We put all of our effort into it. It wasn't the full team. It was only like up to 4 people each day. And then we look at the second game and we say, well, we want to give players more of that experience, but we don't want it to be, so just as sucks being the second game, we don't want it to just be at that level anymore. Because otherwise we could have just made 20 levels and then said, okay, now instead of a $4 game, it's a $20 game, because now it's got all this content because that's what you people ask for. It's just like wanting to make sure the next thing is always better across the board. And as far as like the actual motivation to do that beyond just the craft, I don't know. It's more fun.
Yeah.
maybe that's too much of a simplification, but it is more fun.
It is more fun.
It's more fun to play it. It's also more fun to play it. Like, you got to end up playing your game for like
right.
hours.
Yeah, you do have to over in testing and just making sure it's good in the first place.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding those people to work with you on your games that give a shit, that want to do better every time. Was it luck finding these people? Was it something about the company culture that inspired them to be that way, or did you look for that type of individual to begin with, and how did you find them?
I think some of the initial hires are almost coincidental. So we never had a producer for a long time. We recently had a producer for 2 years. In the last 2 years, we've had a producer, and then we lost her recently, which is a shame. She's gone on to do. She's actually going to make her own games now. She was originally a designer in in university, and now she did production because unfortunately that's what the jobs a lot of women in the industry get. But she wants to go back to doing her own game design. So we're excited to see what she does next. But I think because we didn't have a producer for a long time, we often had to hire people who were very self-motivated, and people it was just I guess it wasn't internalized, but it was just a thing we were doing. We would often make hiring decisions based on people we thought were going to be able to manage their own time, and were going to be able to manage their own work, and sort of push themselves to do more, because we knew we didn't have time to do it for them. So we're doing sprint plans or monthlies because we would do planning regardless of whether we had a producer, but it was kind of all this is all what we have to do. Can you, person who's doing the art, break down all your tasks? And if they weren't able to do that, I guess they wouldn't have shaken out. And they kind of knew that going into the studio. So yeah, I don't think it was a very conscious decision on our part. And then on top of that, yeah, we kind of now have sort of driven that as a studio culture. I think the nature of the games we make, even back in when we first hired people in 2016, probably attracted a certain kind of person.
Right. The kind of person who wants to work on a quirky indie game as opposed to let me go work for Activision or...
Yeah, and now that we have multiple games out, I think that'll only continue. Well, there's literally an Activision in our city now as well. So there's people could go get a programmer could get paid 3 times the amount to work at the Activision near us.
Right.
Well, they're all working from home, but there's a studio at some point, and they're hiring lots of people. So that option does exist now. In 2014, that option didn't exist, but so people get to make that decision, and the person who sends in the application is the one making the decision at the end of the day, because they're presenting us with the opportunity to work with them. So I think because I guess we're fairly honest about what we do at face value. If you look at our website, you can see all the stuff we do. You can see that we're a pretty young team. I think someone who is just there are people who are they're made for it. They're made to work in AAA. They just all I care about is textures, really nice textures. And I want them to look I want to do lots of them, and I want them to look great. That kind of person would not fit in with us, but they wouldn't apply either.
Right. Because you'd ask them to do something other than textures.
Well, yeah, we wouldn't even be hiring a texture artist. We'd be hiring an artist. We'd be we need a senior artist, but they were oh, well, I'm kind of just a texture artist. So they wouldn't apply. It would be oh, no, you need to do you need to be able to do some amount of rigging and animation and 3D modeling and texturing and material editing and know about shaders and know about the pipeline. And they'd be oh, I kind of only know this one thing. So I guess we do kind of attract generalists, and the people that tend to be generalists tend to be very self-motivated.
Right.
It's just the nature of it, I guess.
I mean, but you guys have been and are growing. Do you ever see the studio getting to a point where you are involving more specialists and eventually needing a texture artist?
We already kind of do, but I guess that level of specialization is unlikely. And as far as growth strategy, we'd much sort of at the highest level, it's we'd much rather a small, proficient team of people who want to stick around with us forever than grow and grow and grow and just be okay with turnover. So I think the result of being picky with hires is that we will grow very slowly. And we're unlikely to be doing ever more than 2 games at once. Right now, we're just doing 1. Well, kind of doing 2. But at that point, you just never need... And the games will scale with the team size. So we don't really... the need for an extreme specialist is pretty unlikely. That being said, the difference between just an animator, we do need that person in our team. We just don't have them yet. But yeah, that sort of extreme level of AAA specialization, I think, is something that just would never make sense for us.
Now, the project you are currently working on, Justice Sucks, right?
Yep.
You earlier said sequels for indies don't make sense. Well,
yep.
What changed and why? Why now?
I mean, that has changed over time. Like, there have been multiple games that have proven that you can do sequels. And to be honest, like, First Blood was a prototype that we sold. So we were paid to make that game for Humble Bundle. It was in the Humble Monthly back when they were doing originals.
Great program.
Yeah, we did that. We did it on a shoestring budget, and we did exactly what we could do for that shoestring budget. And then after that, we left it for a while, and the people who played it were very positive about it. They thought the character was cute. The game garnered more fan art than any of our other games, because it's a cute little robot vacuum cleaner. It's not called. Yep. And it just kind of made sense to like continue that title because there was a lot of unexplored space creatively, like a ton. Because again, the first game was so small. So we treated the first game like a prototype and decided to expand on that. So it's not really a sequel. It's really just the first game properly. Some parts of the first game will feature in this game, not in the exact form, but like the sort of hash of those levels. Yeah, so it just kind of made sense. And yeah, now there is that idea of like you can't do a sequel as an indie just has shifted.
What do you think changed that perception, at least in your perspective?
For me, it's the way we market games is different. I think the understanding in 2012, 13, 14, when we were starting, was you put out a game, you put it on Steam, you do well because you put it on Steam.
Right. The glory days.
You put it, yeah. And now marketing exists, and community management is a big deal, and bringing people into your space and keeping them there, and having an audience, like understanding that you as a developer who exists for more than one game have an audience, and they would like to see more of what you do. That's why they're your audience. So because that is the new focus, or it really should have always been the focus, to be honest. Because bigger studios definitely understood this. It means you can carry fans between titles more easily. If that's your focus, your studio. So if you're successfully garnering that audience and you're carrying them with you from title to title, then the idea of a sequel isn't so stupid. And especially in the case of Roombo, yeah, like it just, since the first game was so underdeveloped, like it totally made sense to just like take a proper swing at it, So
it's fine to do a sequel because it's not really a sequel.
Not really a sequel. I don't know, but there might not be that many examples. I guess you could look at like Banner Saga, or barely an indie game at this point. But that old debate. It's a very like big, to me. It feels like a really big game, but I guess it's probably on a small team. But there are a couple of titles out there that Hotline Miami. Yeah, if you can, it's like if you can get the fans to buy the second game,
right?
And the second game is worth making, then make it. But I guess those are the two questions that you have to answer first. And the stupid thing would be to be like, well, my first game did badly, but I'll get him on the second one.
Right. That's tough. That's a tough sell. Doubling down on any concept at any time is really, really rough. What makes you decide if a sequel is worth doing?
Oh, I think what I just said about like, yeah, definitely like, if the sequel or the remaster or whatever is gonna present enough new reasons for you creatively that it's not just like the same game but more polished or more of it, and that is definitely the case with Justice Sucks. And then yeah, if the audience was asking for more, I guess that's also specifically the case for us. Like they were literally saying like, I wish there was more of this, because it was like a 30-minute game.
Right.
And they might find out that when they play the game, they're like, I actually only wanted an hour. Or I actually really only wanted half an hour. But that's the decision we've made, and we'll find
32
out.
32 minutes was my threshold.
Yeah. But the demo's been going well. We've been doing playtests with this new game, and it's got more than 30 minutes of content. So people are responding well to it. So we'll see, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, right. No, I mean it makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, I'm starting to see it within our own studio and in others that rolling game to game is a process of bringing along your existing audience, and then the newness or whatever's attractive about the new game draws in a couple more people, and you slowly start to snowball and pick up new friends along the way.
Yeah, I think the people who are doing that really well is like local. Like if we're talking about closer to our scales, would be like Kit Fox did an exceptional job of that, especially keeping the titles within the same style, almost not semi-procedural narrative was sort of like the rough box you could put most of their games in.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas I think for us, it's funny. Games are funny.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's studio personality, though. I mean, there's a whole nother conversation about like,
yeah,
you don't even intend. I think it's completely unintentional. What that ends up being for your individual studio, or it's very hard to set out and be like, we're going to be the studio that does. All our games are about fire, and then you make 50 games about fire, and then people are like, okay, why? Versus some it's your personality. It's just you can't escape that coming through in your games. I'm curious. At any point, did you recognize like when that like element of your collective personality sort of started to develop in the early days, like working together?
Yeah, I think we kind of knew it from the start. Like, I mean, from like day dot.
Actually, I don't even know the story. How did you three come together?
So me and Winston, were the co-founders. We started the studio in 2014 to make Hazamino, which is a mobile game. It's like it was like I don't even know if you can download. I can get it on my phone, but that's because I already own it.
Right.
I think it's not first purchase anymore. It's a infinite runner where you control little dudes on the side of the screen as you do, and also play Tetris at the same time. Brutal. And the Tetris blocks form the bridge that you run. Yeah,
interesting.
Kind of doesn't work, but it was the thing. Kind of quirky looking. It's pixel arty, but also 3D. It was strange. So Winston had a prototype for that when we finished uni, and he was like, "You want to start a studio and then make this a real game?" But we had been working together for about a year, both at uni and on a ton of like jams and projects. And we had made, like, I'll give you an example of three of the games we made together during that period of time. So we made this before, and we made Screen Sheet around that time. So Screen Sheet's jam was 2014 as well. So we made Samurai XX, which was the first game we ever made, which is the game about being a blind samurai who navigates through sound. That was in 2013. We made a game called Frowntown, which looked kind of like Katamari Damacy. It had stolen music from Katamari. And you ran around town. You were a man with a TV for a head called Steve. And you were really sad, so you had to go and do tasks around the town. But the more time elapsed, I can't remember what made it happen, but you have this aura around you of sadness, and it makes people attack you because they're very happy and they don't like you because you're sad. Hence the Frowntown. And it's like a very challenging game about trying to, because you just have to like do 12 things in town, but the longer you do it for, the bigger that aura of sadness gets, so that more people like start chasing you. And it's like a 3D third person game. Not sure if that's available. There's also Bear Attack, which is a game where you play as a bear defending a forest from people who are coming in, and you need to kill people because you're hungry. And the only people that are in the forest are these like hermits, and if you kill too many of them, hunters and woodsmen start appearing, and the woodsmen start cutting down the trees, and the hunters try to shoot you. So when the trees get cut down anywhere there were no trees, you move slower, and then the hunters can shoot you more easily. So you're in this ever decreasing space. But if you eat enough people, you can poo and regrow the forest.
Yeah, man, the personality's there. Like in all of these concepts, it's like immediately evident. It's beautiful.
And then so that was that's all stuff we made. And then like it started 2014. We made Screen Sheet. We jammed with myself, Winston, and Hadley and Ellie, and that the four of us made that. Hadley ended up going back to work, finished off uni, and then he got a job somewhere. Ellie joined us in the studio after that. So we like made Hazamina and Screen Sheet at the same time. But like Hazamina was done, me and Ellie started doing Screen Sheet for real, like taking it from the jam. And yeah, like at that point we kind of were like, well, there's this element of people and just the nature of the games we kept pitching to each other, because we would just like have a beer and then talk about shit we wanted to make while working on Screen Sheet. Because by like 2015, because we finished the game in sort of 2015, and we were just doing support and porting, we were pitching games to each other constantly. And yeah, like nothing we pitched didn't have some kind of gag or like it feels so trashy to say gimmick, but yeah, it was always something just off about it. If it was straight laced, like it always had like some weird undertone. Right. So yeah, and that was just what we were doing. So it just kind of made sense to keep on that track because it's what we kept wanting to make.
Yeah, it worked. It works. I mean, like I said, there's something charming and earnest about the entire collection. Like it's really done well. I mean, I've got a million more questions, but I've got to ask because international guests, I'm always curious. Is there anything you can tell us about the Australian game dev scene that we might not know?
Ooh, okay. Our scene is pretty small, but pretty close knit. I think there's 2,000 developers here total across the whole. What wouldn't you know about Australia? I mean, we made some of the first video games. Like we made a Hobbit game back in the 70s. A lot of people don't know that we just had like an industry collapse. Like so, the recent history of Australia kind of dictates how you got to this point where there's a lot of really good games coming out of Australia, and the reason is. In the 2000s, the dollar was really good. And what that meant was a lot of US companies and overseas companies they were looking at the dollars and they were like, well, in America, I can get 100 devs for this much money. In Australia, I can get 200 devs for this much money. And Australia was kind of regarded as like on par with like America, UK, and Australia, as far as like just our ability to kind of do the whole thing.
Education pipeline and
yeah, because pretty high level of education, like and in general, like we have like tech, art, creative, all like in the same house. So that was the sort of view of the country for a long time. So we ended up with a bunch of these mid-sized studios, about 100 to 200 people, that were producing a lot of fucking shovelware movie games, and then real stuff like THQ had some stuff here. They were making. Then there was BioShock was made here. Like the second half of the BioShock studio was here. I think 2 was mostly made in Australia. There was a Borderlands game made here. What else? And we have a really strong. And we also were some of the first people doing like large scale mobile. So Mint and Iron Monkeys were here, and then they got merged, and then they got bought by EA, and now there's like 200 of them. But yeah, in 2008-ish, sort of around that window, basically the dollar shifted and everyone started to lose their investments and all the studios closed. So we lost most of our talent overseas, but the people who stayed formed indie studios, and that's how you've gotten Voxel Agents, who made The Gardens Between. You've got League of Geeks, who made Armello. You've got not us because we're children. You've got a lot of people who are now at Sledgehammer. The Activision studio are ex-AAA here, or they've brought people back overseas. They're like, hey, do you want to work in an Australian studio, but you can still get AAA wages? So, come back. Who else? Hipster Whale, Crossy Road. You've got Mighty Kingdom, who are killing it in Adelaide. Hollow Knight is from here. Like, there's just like so many games, so many good, really good indie games are coming out of Australia. The Goose Game, those people I think they're actually like graphic design students or something. Whenever because they did do you remember Push Me Pull You? That was their first game.
I didn't know they were related.
Yep, it's the same studio.
Wow.
Yeah, Pimpy as it's known. So yeah, They were just like, I think they were just graphic design students. But yeah, we have this weird thing of producing like pretty high quality small games.
Is that because of the sort of connection to the collapse of AAA in Australia?
I think they're, yeah. Oh, I was going to point out Defiant as well. Speaking of other AAA people who are making like mini AAA games because they made Hand of Fate 1 and 2. That's how you get stuff like Defiant, I think. And I think stuff like Goose is a result of just our culture locally. I was on some panel recently where we were talking about like why Australian games are so weird and so we're so interested in novelty on the whole. And I think it's because we are kind of like a joke country to most of the world. When we travel, people laugh at us, like not in a mean way. We're just like, you know, the history of Australia is very sad. And if you grew up here in the 90s or you just grew up here recently, you don't think about that history very often. And all you can think about then is like, how do we stand in the world? And we're just like pretty affluent. We have a lot of free time. The weather's pretty good. And the rest of the world seems like a joke to us. Because like everything's pretty chill here.
Right.
So we don't produce a lot of our own media. Ironically, I feel like we produce more games than any other form of media. That's actually like, if you talk to an Australian, like, and they consume like movies, books, games, music, whatever, like if they play games, they probably have played some Australian games, whereas I bet you've never seen an Australian movie.
Right. That's interesting.
Unless it was filmed here, like, which a lot of them are. They film them here. They don't say they film them here.
Right.
I think in the 90s, Sydney was really popular.
We've got a similar thing in Toronto. Yeah, in Vancouver.
Oh,
also.
yeah.
A lot of movies are we can see the backdrop is claims to be New York.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's a similar thing as what you have in Canada, but yeah, it's just like globally, like we're not that important. We're just a consumer of other people's goods, really. We don't produce anything particularly useful besides uranium and coal. There's not a lot of people here, so you know you grow up in that culture, and I think you have this way of looking out on you spend a lot of time looking out, not inwards. And that's how we get to where we are. Like why we made the American dream and not the Australian and opals. I did read that book about opals when I was a kid. It's a long story if you read it. Big deal in the gem world. Sorry, your Twitch chat is telling me something I didn't know.
Thanks, Blue.
So yeah, it's just a different kind of culture to come up in. Like I think compared to America, you know the thing like Americans, you compare like Poland and America, and when America makes games about war, they make games about winning war.
Mm-hmm.
When Poland makes games about war,
right,
they're always like about the experience of being there.
Right.
So that's wasted time. But I think and our view is like, well, everything is a joke. So,
does that outward facing culture does it make you want to, like, you started to say something about the reason you made American Dream as opposed to Australian Dream. Does it make you want to a lot of people outward facing either want to project their culture outward and try and get noticed, or I notice in Canada, because we also consume 95% of our movies we only watch Hollywood. Even with Canadian music force fed down our throats, we still listen to American music. There is still a tendency to want, rather than pushing Canadianness on America, we want to be absorbed by the American culture. And I'm curious if that holds true for Australian media producers as well.
I think I don't think we feel like that for games, I guess. Because, like, I don't think an American would have ever made a game like the American Dream.
No. Just like Broforce was made in South Africa.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think in games I don't feel like, I feel like the people who actually produce media here don't feel like that. It's just the consumers. When you're consuming media, you don't really think about it too often of like, why would I want to produce, like, it's kind of like when you learn history in school. Why would you care about the history of your own country? You live here. What's the big deal, right? I want to learn about the world. It's that like small town feeling of like you always want to leave the place you grew up. And I think in the case of the stuff we're producing and like talking about Australian stories, to be honest, as a white Australian, I don't feel like it's my place. Nor do I feel like I have the education to speak about the realities, if it's make something historical or even current, right? I just feel like I'm not in a position to properly tell that story because of where I've come from. I would have to outsource it to someone else, at which point it's not my story, it's theirs. So, and there are some people doing that work. It's just that they're not promoted very well, or they're not able to get international appeal because they're not making commercial works, or they're just like, it's on the fringe, and it's like there's gonna have to be at some point. This is going to be a breaking point where we learn how to make stuff that can be consumed broadly, but also tell those stories, which I think is the true skill of games, where they can bridge that gap of being like something that everyone can play, but then they can have a background message, or they can actually like tell you something about the world that you didn't know beforehand. But yeah, I definitely don't feel like it's my place to do that.
What is the best part of making games in Australia?
It's probably living in Australia. I live in Melbourne, which is a pretty good city. I grew up in Sydney. But yeah, I've been to a couple of places. I've been to Canada, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'll fight you on this one.
Yeah. The weather seems nice. I don't like hot weather.
It's the outside. Oh, right. If you like snow, it's good. We got nice weather for 4 months of the year.
Well, yeah, having been to the US a lot, I don't want to live there. Yeah. So it's a very, very pleasant country to live in if you're white. It can be bad. Again, it's that place of privilege there, but it's pretty good. The only painful thing is like travel sucks. Getting anywhere. We're in the opposite side of the world to everyone.
Right. And shipping.
And shipping is terrible. Yes.
Right. Brutal. I guess before we kind of close up, do you want to tell everybody a bit more about Justice Sucks, or what they should look for in your games? Or
yeah, I mean, if you go to, I don't know how to get to the Steam developer page, but
I will drop the link.
Yeah, boom, but if you go to samuraipunk.com, you also can find all that stuff. We're currently working on Justice Sucks and Trios. Trios is on hold while people are working on Justice Sucks, and then we'll be back on Trios to finish it off because it's almost done. Trios is this really fun, very, very tight, very zen math puzzle game. We are looking for playtesters. You can go to our itch page to buy that and then send us feedback. Justice Sucks is a game where you play as a robot vacuum cleaner who's out to get revenge for his lost family. It is a mix of stealth action where you kill people using smart technology in the house, and you suck up the blood and you charge up awesome abilities. It's pretty fucking weird, and it's very silly because you're still at the end of the day a robot vacuum cleaner. You're not like some dude with a sword, and you do eat people. So yeah, that's what we're working on. I think we're probably going to be shipping it sometime this year. We haven't firmed up a date yet because we're still trying to make that call. I'm like, oh, how much content is too much content? How long do we want to work on this thing? Trying to balance that with the polish and stuff. So, but yeah, it's coming together. We haven't decided yet. We might do similar thing with Trios, where we're doing like an earliest access, where it's like not on Steam in early access, it's on itch, but you get a Steam key because we don't want to put it out, but we do want feedback. And we want to just like let you get the whole game. It's like the game is going and the game's done. So we might do a similar thing. We might actually do early access. Haven't decided, Plans.
It's a tough call. It's a tough call to pull the trigger on deciding how to get the feedback versus public release of an early access. Exactly.
Yeah, like we did a demo and we put that out and that did well, but like now we're at the point where it's like, well, the demo only showed off one level. Now we want to like figure out if like the metagame is interesting, right? So that's, you kind of have to give the player the whole game for that. Yeah.
Hey, good luck. I'm looking forward to seeing it. It was really, really great talking. where I dropped the link to the Samurai Punk developer page on Steam. Guys, follow on Twitter, Samurai Punk or Nicholas MC1. Yeah. Anything? Any advice for all the fresh devs in the chat right now?
Oh my god.
This is your one chance to impart great wisdom unto them.
Don't.
You have 10 seconds. Go. Don't make games. Don't make games.
No.
Quit now.
Quit while you're ahead. No, just like make stuff. I don't know.
Have fun.
Have fun. Yeah, it's fun.
It can be.
Don't do it if it's not fun.
Don't do it if it's not fun. All right. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It's great catching up. Guys, I'm gonna throw you away. I don't know who's gonna babysit you for the rest of the night, but be good. I'm probably not gonna be online. I have not streamed all week. I am way too busy with budgets and other junk, but I'll see you guys when I see you. Take it easy. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot.